I'm Alice, and let me tell you, I've weathered my fair share of rough patches, but honestly, who hasn't, right? My dad, bless his heart, he was my rock, my everything ever since Mom passed away when I was just a little tyke. It was the two of us against the world, a real team. He always stressed the heck out of the importance of education, scraping together every single dime he could find to fuel my college dreams. "You're gonna make it, kiddo," he'd assure me with a wink, even as he carefully dropped another handful of pennies into our battered college fund jar. And you know what? I didn't just believe him. I believed in us. After high school, I enrolled at the local community college, determined to make a name for myself in the cutthroat world of investment management. It was there, amidst stacks of textbooks and lukewarm coffee, that I met Jake. He was part of my cohort, undeniably charming, with this scruffy, just rolled out of bed vibe that somehow worked absolute wonders on me. We clicked instantly, stealing glances during tedious lectures and sharing whispered jokes over that dreadful cafeteria brew. But then, just when a glimmer of hope started to shine, the ground beneath me crumbled. Dad passed away unexpectedly, without a single warning, just gone. And just like a house of cards in a hurricane, our fragile financial security fluttered away too. It turned out that college fund was more a testament to Dad's unwavering hope than a realistic bank account. With him gone, not only was I drowning in grief, missing his steady guidance like a limb torn away, but I also faced the stark, brutal truth that my college days were abruptly numbered. I managed to claw my way through my first year on sheer willpower and the rapidly dwindling remnants of what little savings we had. But eventually, the money ran bone dry, and I had to drop out. Dad had left me the apartment, a small, slightly run-down 3-bedroom in a less than glamorous part of town. It wasn't much, the wallpaper peeling like sunburnt skin, the floorboards creaking with every step, but it was home, the last tangible piece of him I had left. One particularly bleak and chilly evening, Jake came over to the apartment, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his faded jeans, his eyes taking in the peeling wallpaper and the general air of faded glory. "You live here alone, Alice?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of something I couldn't quite decipher. "Yeah," I replied, trying in vain to smooth down a particularly rebellious strip of wallpaper that seemed determined to detach itself completely. "Just me now. It's not much, but it's what I've got." He watched me for a long moment, his gaze intense, before stepping closer and taking my hands in his. "Let's get married, Alice," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "I want to take care of you. Let's start our life right here." It was sudden, undeniably so, but nothing in my life had ever followed a predictable script. So why start now? "Okay, Jake," I whispered. And in that moment, despite the whirlwind of grief and uncertainty, it felt right. We didn't wait long. The wedding was as modest as they come. A quick ceremony at City Hall with a couple of close friends as witnesses. Jake's parents, well, they were a no-show. They'd never really approved of me, deeming me too plain, their whispers like little daggers, thinking I couldn't hear their snobbish pronouncements. Not one of us, that girl. But Jake squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with a fierce tenderness that momentarily eclipsed their judgment. "I love you," he murmured. "That's all that matters." After the brief ceremony, we walked back to now our apartment, the late afternoon sun casting long, melancholic shadows on the cracked sidewalk. Jake wrestled with a bottle of the cheapest champagne the corner store had to offer, finally popping the cork with a pathetic little pfft. He poured us each a trembling glass of the bubbly liquid. To us, he toasted, lifting his glass, a hopeful glint in his eyes. I echoed the toast, the cheap champagne fizzing on my tongue, tasting strangely like a fragile blend of hope and terrifying new beginnings. Jake and I had this agreement, a seemingly straightforward plan. He'd hit the books, burying himself in college courses, while I'd shoulder the burden of the bills. Once he snagged his degree, it would be my turn to chase the education I'd been forced to abandon when life decided to pile on the heavy stuff. Simple, right? Oh, how naive I was. Life, as it so often does, had other plans. I plunged into a grueling routine, working 2 jobs to keep our heads above water. By day, I was a cashier at a bustling grocery store, dealing with endless lines of impatient customers and the occasional late-night shopper with a cart full of questionable items. By night, I traded my stained apron for another at a local greasy spoon diner, serving up artery-clogging burgers and lukewarm coffee to weary truck drivers and the transient souls who drifted in during the wee hours. It was physically and emotionally draining, but I pushed through the bone-deep fatigue, fueled by the flickering image of someday walking back through those college doors. Jake, meanwhile, was supposedly deep in his studies, his nose perpetually buried in textbooks. Or so he claimed. But as his academic pursuits intensified, so did his demands. "Alice, when's dinner?" he'd whine the moment I dragged my exhausted body through the apartment door, the smell of stale grease clinging to my clothes. "I can't eat this fast food crap anymore. I need something decent, like Mom used to make." I'd bite back the simmering anger, the exhaustion, a lead weight in my limbs, and toss my keys onto the worn kitchen table. "Maybe learn to cook it yourself, Jake. I'm not your mom." He'd scowl, his face hardening into a familiar mask of resentment. "I'm studying my butt off to make something of myself. The least you could do is keep the house decent." His words, sharp and dismissive, would slice through my weariness, sparking a bitter fire in my chest. Yet I'd swallow the retort, fearing the irreparable crack it could cause in our already fragile agreement. Jake's parents were no help, their polished, educated world a stark and constant contrast to my high school diploma and diner-stained uniform. They barely acknowledged my existence, and on the rare occasions they did, it was to offer a backhanded compliment or a thinly veiled critique. "You would understand this if you had finished your education, dear," Jake's mother would say, her voice dripping with condescension as she sipped her perfectly brewed tea, glancing pointedly over the top of her designer glasses. Jake never defended me. He just nodded along, soaking up their judgmental words like gospel. More and more, he'd spend nights at their pristine suburban home, escaping our cramped apartment and the mounting responsibilities it housed. One particularly grueling evening, as I scrubbed the stubborn diner grease from under my fingernails, Jake dropped another bomb. "I'm staying at my parents' tonight. Need a real study environment and a good night's sleep." I slammed the bathroom cabinet a little harder than necessary, the cheap wood protesting with a loud crack. "Fine, do what you gotta do." The words were clipped, sharp with all the unspoken resentments that festered beneath the surface. As the days bled into months, I found a strange, hollow solace in the repetitive routines of my jobs. The monotonous tasks allowed my mind to drift, to momentarily escape the mounting frustrations at home. I became a robot, moving through the motions. Scan items, smile mechanically, serve lukewarm food, clean up spills, rinse and repeat. Then, one particularly long and soul-crushing night, I came home to an empty apartment. No Jake, no apologetic note, just a hastily scribbled piece of paper stuck to the fridge. "Gone to study, make sure dinner's ready tomorrow." I crumpled the note in my fist, the cheap paper cutting into my palm, a small, insignificant pain compared to the ache in my chest. Alone in the dim light of our cramped kitchen, I allowed myself a fleeting moment to truly feel it all. The bone-deep exhaustion, the gnawing loneliness, the simmering, impotent anger. I leaned against the cold countertop, eyes closed, a silent tear escaping despite my best efforts to dam the flood. After what felt like an eternity of grinding through 2 soul-numbing jobs and watching Jake bury himself in his books, the day finally arrived when he graduated. He landed a job almost immediately, a coveted position at a prestigious investment firm downtown, and the news brought a fragile breath of fresh air into our strained lives. His new job came with a paycheck that felt like hitting the lottery compared to my meager nightly tips at the diner. I remember sitting across from him at our small, worn kitchen table one evening, a tentative excitement bubbling up inside me. "So, with your new job," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, laced with hopes and dreams long deferred. I was thinking it might be time for me to cut back at work and start looking at programs, to pick up where I left off. Jake didn't even look up from his expensive takeout. "Alice, we can't afford that. Every penny has to be accounted for, and with the way things are, you know how tight the budget is." His fork clattered against the ceramic plate, a harsh, dismissive sound that echoed his words. I leaned back in my rickety chair, my heart sinking like a stone, but not yet completely defeated. I could keep one job, maybe just the day shifts. We'd still have a steady income, and I could manage night classes. He shook his head, his voice firm, dismissive. Just forget about college, Alice. We need stability, not more debts. It's not practical. The conversation ended there, a heavy, unspoken weight settling between us. But the argument continued in my head for days, a relentless internal debate. Before I could press the issue further, life threw another curveball. I found out I was pregnant. Our daughter, Lily, became my new and all-consuming priority, and the dream of college faded further into the background, a once bright aspiration dissolving into the demands of motherhood. Raising Lily was a profound joy, a love I'd never known, but it was also another chain, albeit a precious one, tying me to routines and responsibilities I hadn't chosen alone. I continued working at the grocery store, my own dreams shelved like the forgotten products on a dusty aisle. Jake's criticisms didn't stop with my shelved education. They seeped into my parenting, a constant stream of nitpicking and judgment. "You're not doing it right, Alice. She needs to learn proper manners, not whatever it is you're trying to teach her," he'd say, barely glancing up from his phone, his tone laced with superiority. I remember holding Lily close, whispering promises to her that I'd begun to doubt I could ever keep. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." As Lily grew, Jake's parents became increasingly involved, their influence casting a long shadow over my own. They paid for a fancy preschool, a place that felt more like a social club than an educational institution, and every school event became an ostentatious exhibition of their grandparental pride. Then, one cool evening, Jake matter-of-factly explained a new rule. "Alice, it's best if you don't come to the school events. The teachers, they have a certain expectation of family. We can't ruin Lily's opportunities." I felt the sharp sting of those words, a cruel slap dressed up as paternal concern. So what am I supposed to do? Just stay home and pretend I don't have a daughter who's growing up, learning things I'm not teaching her, becoming someone I barely know? "It's for the best," was all he said, his indifference the final, cold nail in the coffin of our once shared dreams. The years twisted along, each one adding weight to Jake's words. Not the kind of weight that anchors you in safety, but the kind that relentlessly pulls you under. His sharp commands to our daughter Lily left invisible scars, teaching her subtle lessons of disrespect and disdain toward me, her own mother. "Alice, don't bother telling her what to do. She listens to me, not you. It's for her own good," Jake snapped one evening when I gently suggested Lily might help set the table, his words delivered right in front of her. This was the constant, insidious erosion of my role as a mother. I watched, my heart sinking with each passing day, as my little girl's eyes hardened to mirror her father's coldness. "You don't know anything, Mom," Lily would toss at me when I asked for a simple bit of help around the house, her tone a perfect imitation of her father's dismissive drawl. Each word was a tiny, sharp barb. I tried to reach her, to bridge the widening chasm between us with gentle mother-daughter chats, but she only pulled further away, retreating into a world meticulously painted by Jake and his condescending parents, a world where I didn't belong. One humiliating afternoon brought everything painfully into focus. Lily had friends over, their laughter and light voices echoing down the hallway of our increasingly fractured home. I was cleaning, trying to maintain some semblance of order in the chaos, when I bumped into them in the hallway. Lily froze, her eyes darting nervously between me and her impeccably dressed friends. I smiled, wiping my hands on my worn apron, about to offer a friendly hello, but before the words could form, Lily cut in, her voice dripping with a casual cruelty that made my stomach clench. "Oh, this is just our housekeeper." Her friends nodded, barely giving me a second glance as they shuffled past into Lily's immaculately kept room, a space that felt deliberately off-limits to the likes of me. The door clicked shut, and the muffled bursts of teenage giggles were like 1,000 tiny needles pricking my heart. I retreated to the kitchen, sinking against the cold, unforgiving refrigerator, as tears, hot and bitter, betrayed my desperate resolve not to let this break me. I was her mother, not some dismissed servant in my own damn home. That evening, I confronted Jake, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and profound hurt, but surprisingly firm. How can you let her, our daughter, treat me like this? Today, she called me the housekeeper Jake in our own home. Jake didn't even look up from his newspaper. The rustling pages a deliberate act of dismissal. Maybe if you didn't look the part, she'd respect you more. You're always cleaning, always in those rags. What do you expect? His words, so casually cruel, stung with a venom that sliced through whatever fragile defenses I had left. I'm trying, Jake. I'm trying to make this a home. But you and your parents, you're teaching her to hate me. He scoffed, folding his newspaper with infuriating precision. Alice, you need to stop being so damn sensitive. She's growing up in a different world than you did. She needs to fit in. Nights turned restless, my thoughts spiraling into a dark abyss. Jake's growing emotional distance, the casual cruelty of his parents, and now Lily's blatant rejection painted a stark and terrifying picture. I was an outsider in my own life, my role diminished to that of a silent provider, unseen and utterly unappreciated. As I watched Lily blossom into a teenager, her embarrassment of me became more pronounced. Her cutting comments about my outdated clothes and simple manners slicing deeper because they were merely echoes of Jake's own insidious criticisms. She was ashamed to be seen with me, her own mother, who had sacrificed everything only to be rendered invisible in their carefully constructed world. Turning 37 wasn't supposed to be a monumental milestone, but I had clung to a fragile hope that it might mark a turning point. A shift towards something better, something kinder. With a heart full of tentative hope, I booked a table at a nice restaurant downtown. A small celebration, just me, Jake, and Lily. Nothing fancy, but something to maybe, just maybe, bring us back together, even for a single night. I got home from work that evening, my spirits buoyed by the thought of a quiet dinner with my family. But the apartment was eerily silent when I walked in. Too quiet. Jake and Lily were sitting in the living room, their faces turned toward the television, looking like they were braced for terrible news. "Hey," I said, trying to inject a cheerful note into the heavy atmosphere. "I've got a surprise. I booked us a table at Marcello's for dinner to celebrate my birthday. Just the three of us." "Maika?" Jake turned off the TV and looked at me, one eyebrow raised in sardonic amusement, a cruel smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Alice, seriously? You think we want to go out and celebrate with you? A dropout? What would we even talk about?" His words were delivered with a casual brutality that made my breath catch in my throat, his smirk hardening into a sneer. "Yeah, Mom," Lily chimed in, her voice echoing her father's disdain. "It's kind of embarrassing. You wouldn't even know which fork to use." I felt my face flush with shame, the sting of their words like a physical blow. I just thought we could be a family for tonight." Jake laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "A family? With you making a fool of yourself? No thanks. Actually, here's my gift to you." He stood up, walked over to his briefcase, and pulled out a crisp white envelope, tossing it onto the coffee table with a dramatic flourish. Confused and suddenly filled with a cold dread, I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a divorce application. This is your gift?" I stammered, the words catching in my throat. "Yeah, consider yourself free from us. We're done, Alice. I'm taking Lily and we're moving out." "You can keep this dump," he said, his voice cold and calculating. Lily just nodded, standing up to join her father. "I'd rather live with Dad. I can't be seen with you, Mom. It's just too embarrassing." And they packed up their belongings with chilling efficiency, their movements swift and practiced, as if they'd rehearsed this cruel departure. I watched, frozen, as my world was dismantled piece by agonizing piece, not just the physical remnants of our shared life, but the last vestiges of any affection, any pretense of a relationship, vanished with each item they packed. They left without a backward glance, without a single word of goodbye, the door closing with a soft, almost polite click that echoed like a gunshot in the suddenly vast and empty apartment. The divorce proceedings were swift, clinical, and utterly brutal. Jake's parents, those paragons of virtue, testified about my supposed inadequacies. painting me as an uneducated, unfit mother in stark, unforgiving strokes. Even Lily, my own daughter, spoke with a steady, rehearsed voice, her words like tiny knives twisting in my gut. I want to live with my dad. He's better for me. Sitting there in that sterile courtroom, listening to the litany of my perceived failures, I felt something inside me finally break. Or maybe in that shattering moment, something new began to solidify, a core of steel hardening into unwavering resolve. They were all strangers, their venomous words no longer capable of wounding me as deeply as they once had. I was alone, truly alone for the first time in what felt like forever. But perhaps that terrifying solitude held the very freedom I desperately needed. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I needed to prove, if to no one else but the broken woman staring back at me in the bathroom mirror, that I was capable of so much more than they had ever allowed me to believe. That burning resolve, that fierce, defiant spark, led me back to the very doors of the community college I had been forced to abandon years ago. I enrolled again, older than most of my bright-eyed classmates, but armed with a fierce determination that only life's hardest knocks can bestow. I hired tutors, spending countless evenings grappling with complex investment theories and intricate financial models, my eyes blurring from the relentless strain. Social media became a minefield, a constant source of potential pain, though every so often, a carefully curated photo of Jake, Lily, and that woman, Jake's new, undoubtedly suitable partner, would pop up on my feed. They looked sickeningly happy, carefree, living it up in some swanky downtown apartment that screamed of the very luxury they had denied me. The sharp sting of seeing them so blissfully unaware of the wreckage they had left behind was a brutal one, but instead of allowing it to drag me down into the mire of self-pity, I used it as fuel. Each saccharine picture, each boastful post, pushed me harder, channeling my raw anger and deep hurt into my studies, turning bitterness into a powerful motivator. Graduation day finally arrived, and the woman who walked across that stage to receive her hard-earned degree was a world away from the scared, defeated woman Jake had discarded. You've got what it takes, Alice. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. My favorite professor, Dr. Henson, a woman who had seen her own share of battles, told me during our final meeting, her words a soothing balm to the still raw edges of my pride. With her strong recommendation, I landed a coveted entry-level position at a respected investment firm downtown, stepping into the high-stakes world of finance with a quiet determination to rise. The corporate world was another kind of battlefield, but one I was now surprisingly well-equipped to navigate. I started as just another face in the crowd, but not for long. Within 3 grueling but ultimately rewarding years, I climbed from the ground floor to the head of a major department, my name emblazoned on an office door, my decisions shaping the company's financial future. Alongside my burgeoning career, I completely revamped my life. I traded my old beat-up sedan for something sleek and powerful, something that hummed with a quiet confidence under my touch, like a promise kept. My modest apartment followed suit, transforming from rundown to modern chic, a high-rise with breathtaking views of the city that twinkled like the stars I was now reaching for. Shopping for new clothes wasn't just about style, it was about building armor, each impeccably tailored suit or sleek dress chosen to project the new me, the competent, capable businesswoman who commanded respect. My hair, once always pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in stylish waves or was pinned up in chic designs that spoke of meticulous attention to every detail. Only my closest friends knew the full extent of my transformation, the phoenix that had risen from the ashes of my past. "You're doing what you were meant to do, Alice," my loyal friend Jenna told me over celebratory cocktails one evening, her eyes wide with admiration as she took in the latest iteration of me. "It's like you finally found your stage." "Yeah," I replied, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips as I sipped my expensive martini. "I guess I have." Jake and Lily, and all the agonizing pain associated with them, began to fade into the background, becoming just a painful chapter in my story, not the defining narrative. Then, one late night, As I was casually browsing job listings, a habit I hadn't quite shaken, I stumbled across an opening that made my heart skip a frantic beat. A department head position at none other than the very company where my arrogant ex-husband, Jake, worked. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me: disbelief, a flicker of vengeful satisfaction, and a potent surge of determination. I applied, half out of a deep-seated need to prove myself beyond any shadow of a doubt, and half out of the sheer, audacious thrill of the possibility. The interview was scheduled for the following week. I walked into that sterile conference room with all the quiet confidence of a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose and everything in the world to prove. The interviewers were a panel of 3 impeccably dressed executives, each more impressed than the last, as we discussed everything from intricate market trends to cutting-edge financial strategies. By the end of the hour, they seemed genuinely excited about the fresh perspective and sharp intellect I could bring to their firm. "Well, Alice," the senior interviewer remarked, a genuine smile finally breaking through his professional demeanor, "I must say it's refreshing to see such a clear vision and detailed knowledge. We'd be lucky to have you on board." "Thank you," I replied, my tone steady, my resolve firmer than ever. "I'm ready to hit the ground running." My first day at the new firm felt surreal, something straight out of a dramatic movie scene. As I was introduced to my new team, the room filled with polite applause and welcoming smiles. That is, until Jake's face came into view. The sheer shock etched on his features could have powered the entire city for hours. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, his eyes wide with disbelief, his mouth slightly agape. The head of the company, a distinguished gentleman named Mr. Reynolds, seemed mildly amused by the palpable tension in the room. He clapped a friendly hand on my shoulder and announced, "Everyone, I expect you'll give Alice all the support she needs. She comes highly recommended, and I believe she will lead this department to new heights." Jake's reaction was anything but gracious. As the rest of the team dispersed, he stormed up to Mr. Reynolds, his voice low but laced with barely suppressed fury. "I applied for this position. Why was it given to her? What does she have that I don't?" Mr. Reynolds looked from a furious Jake to me, a subtle eyebrow raised. "Jake, the decision was based purely on merit. Alice's qualifications and vision for the department far exceed what you've shown us thus far. There's a lot you could learn from her." "Learn from her?" Jake scoffed, his voice rising incredulously. "This has to be some kind of joke, right?" "No joke, Jake. I suggest you adjust your attitude and focus on your own responsibilities," Mr. Reynolds replied coolly, his authority radiating through the room. Humiliated and seething, Jake did something I never in a million years would have expected. He ripped his company ID badge from his lapel, threw it down on the polished conference table with a clatter, muttered something about a stupid boss, and stormed out of the room. Mr. Reynolds sighed, shaking his head as he watched Jake's dramatic exit. "Sorry about that, Alice. I'll handle it from here. Why don't you get started with your team?" I nodded, a small, undeniably satisfied smile playing on my lips as I watched Jake disappear down the hallway, the sound of his furious footsteps like a sweet, unexpected melody. Later that day, I overheard Mr. Reynolds on the phone. "Yes, he resigned. No, I can't give him a positive recommendation. Not after this. We are The rest of the day was a blur of introductions and initial planning sessions, but through it all, one thought remained crystal clear in my mind. Justice, in its own twisted and undeniably satisfying way, had finally been served. Jake had underestimated me, just like he always had, but this time, I had not only survived, I had soared. After Jake's dramatic exit from the office that day, his carefully constructed world began to unravel with astonishing speed. Rumors, juicy and undeniably satisfying, reached me through mutual acquaintances, those who couldn't wait to spill the beans, that Jake's latest mistress, a woman he had undoubtedly deemed more suitable than me, had unceremoniously kicked him and Lily out of her plush downtown apartment. Desperate and with nowhere else to turn, they had been forced to move back in with his parents, the same people who had so readily dismissed me for being too plain. I couldn't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction at how the mighty had fallen. It was during this tumultuous period that Lily, now a college student herself, and every bit as entitled and demanding as she had been taught to be, showed up unannounced at my doorstep. She let out a low whistle as she took in my modern, tastefully decorated apartment. "Wow, Mom, you really upgraded, huh? Guess dumping Dad worked out pretty well for you." Her tone was light, almost conversational, but there was a sharp, calculating edge to it that immediately put me on guard. "Lily, what brings you here?" She sauntered in, making herself entirely too comfortable on my plush velvet sofa, as if she owned the place. "Well, things are a bit tight at Grandpa's, and I thought, you're all rich and well-dressed and educated now. Maybe I could move in here? But I'd need a decent allowance, obviously." I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw Jake's manipulative influence woven deeply into her entitled demeanor. It pained me, a sharp, unexpected pang of what might have been, but the clarity it brought was undeniable. "Lily, I said, my voice calm but firm. "I think you should leave. I'm not going to be used like this. Not by you, not by anyone." Her face crumpled into practiced tears, but they didn't move me the way they once would have. When her tears failed to sway me, her temper flared, mirroring her father's petulant rage. "You're just selfish, just like you always were," she shouted as she stormed out, her parting words a venomous sting in the otherwise peaceful sanctuary of my apartment. News continued to trickle back to me over the following weeks. Jake had reportedly started drinking heavily, unable to cope with his bruised ego and shattered career. Lily, perhaps finally realizing the consequences of her choices, had moved to another city, perhaps chasing the elusive independence she had so desperately craved, or perhaps just running from the wreckage of her parents' lives. As for me, life settled into a fulfilling rhythm of hard-earned success and exciting new beginnings. I met Michael, a kind and intelligent colleague, whose quiet strength and genuine empathy were the polar opposite of Jake's blustering arrogance and casual cruelty. Over time, our professional respect deepened into a tender and supportive love, and we married in a small, joyful ceremony surrounded by the people who truly cherished us. Looking ahead, I felt ready for whatever challenges life might throw my way, secure in the unwavering knowledge that I had not only survived the storm, but had undeniably thrived, crafting a narrative of triumph that was entirely, unapologetically, my own. A valuable lesson. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love and the most profound path to true success involves letting go of those who diminish you and reclaiming the dreams that were once deferred. Don't let anyone else define your worth or limit your potential. Your resilience and determination are your most powerful assets. What are your thoughts on Alice's journey? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after significant hardship? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience and triumph.